Hi, my name is Patricia Kathleen, and this podcast series will contain interviews I conduct with women, female identified, and non binary individuals regarding their professional stories and personal narrative as it relates to their perspective. This podcast is designed to hold a space for all individuals to learn from their counterparts, regardless of age, status, or industry. We intend to transparently investigate the evolving global dialogue regarding underrepresented figures in all industries across the USA and abroad. By hosting these stories and conversations, we aim to contribute to the changing platform and representation of these individuals for the future. Now let's start the conversation. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I am your host, Patricia, and today I'm sitting down with Chana Ginelle Ewing. She is a founder, entrepreneur, and author. You can find out more on her website, chanaewing.com. That is ChanaEwing.com. Welcome, Chana.
Thank you for having me, Patricia.
Absolutely. I'm excited to unpack everything that you do. I know you've got a several different areas that you work within, and I also look forward to unpacking your book, which was a very unexpected surprise when I was doing research on you. For everyone listening, a quick roadmap of today's podcast. I will read a quick bio on Chana, but before I do that, we will first look at unpacking and looking at her academic history as well as early professional career that brought her to where she is now. And then we will look at unpacking her different endeavors, namely Chana's book, An ABC of Equality. Then we will look at her company titled GEENIE and the interesting pivoting point it is at now. And then we will also look towards another endeavor that I will have her explain and enumerate on called Little Big Girl and Company, which is based out of New York City. Then we'll turn our efforts towards looking at goals that Chana has for all of her endeavors as well as personally for the next 1 to 3 years. This is an area that has been changing for every business owner globally. We'll wrap everything up with advice that Chana may have for those of you who are looking to get involved in some of her endeavors or perhaps emulate some of her amazing success. A quick bio on Chana before I start peppering her with questions. Chana Ginelle Ewing is cultural entrepreneur, marketer, and author working across films, books, retail, and tech. She is the author of the best-selling book, An ABC of Equality, with illustrations by Paulina Morgan, published by Quarto in 2019, introducing identity and social justice concepts to children. She believes that identity is a lever to pull to unlock human potential. And entrepreneurship is an opportunity to make dents that move culture forward. She's currently pivoting GEENIE to maximize value for diverse consumers and small business owners. And I kind of dropped that a little bait for everyone to listen in the beginning because I love companies that are in transition, in pivoting moments. I think it's so fun. And Chana, I want to go into that, but before we get there, I'm hoping you can draw just a quick description of your academic background and early professional life that brought you to the launching of Little Big Girl and GEENIE and writing your book.
Yeah. So I'm going to start earlier in my academic background because I think it sort of weaves together nicely around like my professional interests over the last,
Sure.
I guess, since graduating from college, and it's over the last 15 years or so. But very early in life, like in I think 3rd or 4th grade, I learned about this word called screenwriters. Like in screenwriting, like I'd ask my mother, like, who are the people, and I don't know how or what, but I was like, who are the people writing the movies? Like I was, for whatever reason, I realized that I was watching something that was constructed. And that fascinated me. And I wanted to figure out how I could become a screenwriter. So like that was kind of like from being a young child in elementary school, like I just got onto that path of like, you want to create content, like that was my goal.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of the driving force throughout like, middle school and high school, and then eventually college, where I majored in African American Studies and Media Studies at the University of Virginia. So And then, while I was at UVA, it was like really like a focus on um, developing my storytelling craft. And I thought that I was going to become a director, a writer director. And that was going to be my professional career. And so the other piece is that I knew that I wanted to live in New York, because if you want to work in the film and television industry, it's like either two spaces, New York or LA. And I just knew that I was a New York girl. Just like LA was not going to be for me. I'm from the East Coast. I'm from Boston. I love big cities. I love being in a city. So, I was like, New York is going to be where I establish my career. So I came to New York in about 2005. And this is before, and the reason why this is important, because I think today's landscape around filmmaking is a lot different. But like right then, it was still more the traditional filmmaking trajectory, like where you would become a PA, and then work your way up that PA to production supervisor to manager. Like you kind of work up the production track like professionally, and then somehow figure out how to create your become a director, a writer on the side, because it wasn't a real like clear professional through line for writing and directing where you could get paid for it, right? And so it was like pre Kickstarter and pre like
Yep.
Indiegogo, and pre let's do it yourself. It was right when that moment where people were still figuring out how do they, if you weren't independently wealthy and you didn't have huge connections, like how does a 20-something-year-old, make her first film? And so without going to film school. So I did a lot of that production work in New York, realized very quickly that I did not like being a producer. Um, um, and like at all, like I just had no desire to
Yeah.
do production work. Um, and then also like coincidentally, like as I was doing the like full-time job piece, so would do production work over the weekends, and then like had a full-time job. And one of the last full-time jobs that I had was at McKinsey and Company, which is the largest global management consultant firm in the world. Me, even though I went to UVA, like I was a creative at heart. I didn't even know anything about McKinsey until I got there, and like what a big deal it was to be there, right?
Yeah.
And I was an executive assistant in their media and entertainment practice. So it was like just by coincidence, I'm in the media and entertainment practice. Like I want to be in media and entertainment, but I want to be in media and entertainment from the creative end. But I'm now working for folks who are thinking about the business end, right? And they're thinking
Mm.
large clients like Viacom and Disney, and you're thinking about media and entertainment from a global perspective, and I'm serving the partners who are doing this work. So I'm getting a fantastic lens on like what the industry that I want to be in, but
Yeah.
as a creative. And so I'm like, this is really interesting. And another thing that was interesting to me was that like the partners maybe a few years older than me, like they were like, my
Yeah.
eight mates, and it was like, okay, this is interesting. These folks are like, using their brains, using their creativity in some ways, because management consulting, there is some creativity there. And, they're basically getting paid to use their minds. And I thought that was like cool. I had not even, didn't even know that was even a possibility as a career, so when the like recession happened in 2009, I got laid off. And I always tell people, this is really interesting because we're in the middle of another, recession, right?
Yeah.
Laid off, and I mean, I know it's a very privileged perspective to have, but being laid off was game changing for me,
Mm.
because two things happened as a result of me being laid off. I got a severance package. I had unemployment. So for the first time in my life, I had a little bit of money that I didn't necessarily have to like grind for. So that meant that I had some space to think about what it is I want to do, right? Like, and so that's what I mean. So like, if you grew up working class, you grew up without like, someone being able to just like pay for you to explore, it was like that was my moment to actually explore like what are my true interests. And so in the year after being laid off, I spent it really learning about entrepreneurship, learning about consulting, because I had got like that entrepreneurial, even though I was in a company, you know, the way that that company is shaped, it's like, you know, there's these small teams that are going out and supporting other businesses. So I was like, I was, I got that, I was bit by that. Like I got that bug. It was like,
Yeah.
okay, like what is it that I know that I could serve other people with? And what I know really well is storytelling. And so that's where I decided to develop Little Big Girl. And it was like our first initial piece was we were going to use the hero's journey, like just really simple. We were going to utilize the hero's journey to help small businesses tell their stories online. And like that was it. Like, you know, this was like 2009, 2010. Everyone's feeling like I need to be on social media. How do I be on
Yeah.
social media? It's like,
Yeah.
all right, well, you can create a narrative around your business and connect with your consumers using the hero's journey as a kind of a form. And
Okay,
so
let me
that's
grab you really quickly right there just to get some logistics out of the way for all
yeah,
of our nerdy listeners. So 2009, 2010, Little Big Girl launches. Were you the sole founder? Did you
yep,
take any funding or did you bootstrap with that severance package? And who were some of your first clients?
yes. So I took no funding. It was a services company. I think, you know, I don't think there's not a lot of like funding resources for service-based companies.
Right.
But I bootstrapped with the money that I had from my severance and you know pulled a little bit out of my 401k. I figured, hey, I was like I don't know, late 20s at the time, so I was like, oh, like I'll make up for this at some point, you know, like like I was like just
Yeah.
thinking about like how I can get going,
Yeah.
and I
Your first
my first
client?
client was this entrepreneurial program that I was in. So I was in this program called Ladies Who Launch,
Hmm.
and I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they are I don't know if they're as active anymore, but essentially they were at that time they were this like sort of global organization that taught women how to become entrepreneurs, and they had like this membership community online, and so like seeing another opportunity, I was like, well, you all have this great community. The social media doesn't seem to be as tight between the online community, the offline events, and the social media handles. Like, would you be open to me, coming, me coming on board as like your digital marketing strategist? You guys will be my first client. I'll give you a huge discount in order to like become on board as my first client. And they said yes, they went for it. And I mean the insight there is that like which I feel like I don't take a lot of credit for it now, but like I kind of knew it organically. But that was a really good move because starting with a organization that has a bunch of other entrepreneurs that they serve meant that that was an embedded customer pipeline, right? So if I did a good job with the organization, obviously they would recommend me to the women entrepreneurs that are attending their programs, and that's actually what happened. A lot of my first clients were women that were coming out of that program.
It's genius. I mean, and it's built in, it's baked in right there, and to be able to turn on it and pitch them and then have that index of clients that are already coming through, and I'm not intimately, I have heard about ladies who launch from previous times. So I'm not sure what the current statute looks like, but it was almost the earliest forms of like the current day. I want to say like accelerators and
Mhm.
incubator programs, where they kind of
Mhm.
draw you through these techniques, but it was more of an earlier format as I understand it from that. But your take on it and your approach to just repitching it is just, it's so um astronomically powerful. And also to catch people in their infancy, there's something about people that grab companies while they're young, It's a dynamic space. There's usually more room for creativity because they haven't locked into certain things. And also seeing that growth, those, you know, those lifetime colleagues and customers and things of that nature. It's one of the most rare forums, you know, to kind of bump into a company. And I love it. I love that you started there. You didn't tell us why yet. I'm going to ask you, Little Big Girl, the name, where'd that come from?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess like I have this picture. I don't know if you got a chance to look at the logo, but that picture is like the logo is like a picture of like the top of my head and like a fro, but it's a baby picture
Mm.
of me actually that's illustrated. And the picture is like it was taken on my kindergarten graduation day, and I'm like sitting there with my hands on my hip, and for whatever reason, it just made me. Whenever I look at that picture, it makes me feel strong and like
Mm.
it makes me feel like, hey, you already know what you're doing. Because when you're an entrepreneur, you're always second guessing yourself. And so, you know, having the like North Star of my business baked into the title, you know, this I'm this little person, like this little business, this little person, you know,
Yeah.
but I'm big and I'm a girl. And like, it was like, it enabled me to like feel to feel playful about the work and to also like feel like I could do it, you know. So it was really just like it was a nod to my own inner child and like and giving her permission to do the work that I was doing.
That's awesome. And it's a constant reminder. You know, you have the logo. I do like it. I like your art, which is rare because I've been around way too long. And I do like it. I like the art. I like the name. It verges. It's like it's right on that line of like I'm gonna love it or hate it. And I love it.
Mhm,
So it's, you
mhm.
know, it's not like that dividing line, which is
Right,
brave right
right,
off the bat, which I
right,
dig.
right.
And I'm wondering, so the growth, can you speak just kind of generally to the growth of Little Big Girl from its soft launch from 2009, 2010 until now, where we're at in 2020, pre COVID-19 pandemic? Let's take that chunk.
Yeah, so it's always been a fairly small business. I mean, I think we've never had over like 5 or 6 clients at a time. You know, what we've done is like we do projects. So for instance, like one of our recent projects was like around Afropunk when they launched their podcast. So we will do a rollout like that, or we'll be with a film from its like um uh festival premiere to its even Oscar campaign. So that could be like an 18-month window that I'm on a project. We've also had scenarios like when we're worked with like a nonprofit like the Andrew Goodman Foundation. We worked with them for a number of years around how they're messaging to millennials and building internal capacity and programs within that organization that directly targeted millennial audiences. So it really um, because of the nature of the work, you know, we can be sustained by like several kind of ongoing contracts. Um, and then, you know, some spurts, like some sprints with projects that have a defined beginning and end. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, I mean, people use this word pejoratively, but I think, you know, it's been like a lifestyle business, if you will. Like it hasn't been like on a huge growth trajectory or anything like that, but it's enabled me to sustain my life and it's enabled us to like, you know, have folks, contractors and other folks who've worked with us. So
That's nice. And yeah, it sounds like you can grow and shrink to clients' needs with, like you were mentioning, contractors and things of that nature. What would you say the bulk of a large part of what you do for the majority of your clients is with the branding and the marketing? It's such a massive field. Are you handling social media campaigns? Are you developing imagery? Like what areas do you find yourself working most in?
sure. So the bulk of our work is actually around film marketing. And what we're doing there, we're doing websites, we're doing social media campaigns, we're doing social media management, we're also doing influencer marketing. We're just thinking about, we'll typically will work in collaboration with like an impact producer who is thinking about how to get that film out to different partners and we're thinking about so while they're thinking about how to like how that film is engaging partners and communities and building community, we're thinking about how the film is engaging general audiences. So like, what's the messaging for a general audience? How do we target them on social? What sort of events should we do? Who are the different influencers that we should bring to the table? What might we do with your partners that could be a little bit more like audience specific and like talking about the film itself. So we're just really shaping the film for a consumer audience, helping to shape the film for a consumer audience in partnership with impact producers and press.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts there. It's got to be really customizable, right? It depends on the
Mhm.
project as to which area you push harder on. That's
Yeah, it depends on the
interesting.
film.
I want to pivot right here since we're talking about, film and cultural changes really quickly and talk about your book, which at first blush, when I went to buy it and look at it, I thought it was going to be an adult book. I just didn't have any reference or anything else. Because the name, for me, knowing that you were an entrepreneur and this founder, I had assumed it was almost going to be this how-to woman's guide, or I don't know, something like that. And so I was shocked to find a children's board book. And I love it because I think it's so necessary, and it's just beginning what I see to be a new wave of children's books coming out. And I don't think we can get enough to them. And because it's not that long, I'm going to ask you to kind of walk us through it. But it's called An ABC of Equality, and it starts out with it's very very friendly, appropriate across all, even the youngest children's ages. And it goes through the ABCs, and it starts to assign a value to each letter, a word value, and then it kind of enumerates on that, and it brings it into this societal like environment within a paragraph, and then it goes to the next letter. Is that a correct like
I
observation?
love your description. I'm actually going to Google that description. I love that. I love the idea of it. It's like I've never heard anyone describe it quite that way. That it assigns a value to each word and then enumerates and then and then draws to society. Like I think that's like really a perfect description.
Well, and it's genius for me. That's exactly how young brains, audience members who have been listening to me for a couple of years now know I have 4 children, and I knew nothing about educating children, but when I started having them, there were no classes taken. But what you learn very quickly is that you have to place things in a value in an environment. You can't just hold something up and say orange and drop it, because the next thing you pick up, they'll be like orange. There's no way, you need to kind of describe what you're saying. And that's what this does. It takes very philosophical concepts about, important terms that are difficult, citizenship or something like that, where you can kind of like, those are deep terms, and empathy or those kinds of words, and you have to put them in an environment and really relate them back in. And that's exactly what the book does. It's everything, the exact pedagogical lens, if you will, about teaching children about global citizenship and responsibility and empathy and compassion and diversity and all of these, transparency and all of these things that we look at, and the idea of describing those to a 6-year-old brain. And it really does that beautifully. I think it's so remarkable. And I'm wondering, what was the impetus for that for you? What was the philosophical
Yeah,
push?
I'm truly honored. I just have to say I'm truly honored and moved that you really, really got it. I like I'm just like honestly, I'm like taking a moment because it's like
Oh,
you
good.
really, really got it. And so thank you so much for
Absolutely.
spending time with it. So the first thing I like to tell people is that it actually was an opportunity that came to me. So I'm not a religious person, but I have, just to give you a sense of like how woo woo I can be, I have a Monday sessions that I do right now with a group of friends that's called Let's Get Metaphysical.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
like
Yeah.
kind of like how woo woo I can be, meaning that like there's work that you do, but there's also you need to leave space for the universe. Leave space for just magic to happen, right?
Yeah.
And this book was literally one of those open spaces that just dropped in my lap. I literally looked in my inbox one day in 2018, and there was a note from a publisher that said, "Hey, are you interested in writing a children's book?" And I was like, like, okay, I had to look them up to see
Nice.
if this was real. I actually thought it was like
Yeah.
one of these like spam emails, and I looked them up. They were real. Prolific publisher of children's content. So then it became like, well, why me? You know, because you know, you have to, the whole like insecurity around like, well, I didn't position myself as an author, but actually I've been calling myself a storyteller my entire life.
Yeah.
You know, like, so it makes sense. But I was because I didn't actively pursue it, it felt like, can I step into this moment? Can I do this? And so they had the idea. They were like, you know, we want to do a children's book about equality, and we want to know if you would like, if this is something that you'd be interested in. And so we had some conversations, and it was like, yes, I will do this. Like, let's do it. And so in terms of the construction of the book, it is for children, but like, if you can, I think that it's, my idea when writing it was that it was going to be a book that parents were going to read to
Mm-hmm.
their children. So for me, I was always thinking about that first audience, which is the parent. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I was thinking about, not necessarily, it was like, how does a parent think about how to talk about these terms in the simplest ways possible? And so that is the way I approach the book. And I think about it as a bit of like cultural um, instigation, cultural intervention, you
Mm-hmm.
know, cultural um, uh, inspiration. You know, like, I want parents to look at the book and be like, wow, I can do this. I can think about how I am thinking about belief in race and xenophobia. Like, you know, it's a lot of the words are words that you may not even like. Before writing the book, I might have known all these terms just intuitively because as an adult, but I didn't necessarily, if you had asked me before, like how to quickly describe xenophobia, like I wouldn't, you know, like I would have kind of
Yeah.
told you from this large, you know, big conversational piece, but I wouldn't have been able to drill down. And so it's like, how do you drill down on the term and on the conversation, and then be in conversation with yourself, but also with your children around these ideas?
It was, and that's delivered. You know, it's awesome because that's how I received it. And when I read it to my child, that was exactly it. And it's such a sigh of relief because even when you do have those conversations, you know, about my 7-year-old said, "What's the stock market?" And I was like, how am I breaking this down? Like, there's so many terms and systems we live under in this society, and even the more theoretical, you know, what is honesty, what is valiant, like those types of things. You go to define them, and it's very interpersonal, and it changes throughout life, and you end up having this dialogue with their eyes spinning. And so it's just so nice to see someone that's had that conversation and written down this very succinct narrative about some of those terms, especially the negative ones, you know, and having like a very honest rhetoric without getting too brutal. It's tricky. It just is. You know, I find much more comfort in those subject matters in higher academia where you can kind of just let it go, you know, and just throw everything at the wall. But with young minds, that is the true annexation, you know, between those
Yep.
concepts and that term, and honesty and gentility being provided even in the explanation. So I
Yeah.
love it. I want to pivot now and look at GENIE, and I know it's in a transitional moment for you, and I love that. And so I want you to first describe for everyone what GENIE is, the company, and when it was launched, and what it originally did.
Yeah. So just another word about the book that I'd
Oh,
like to
yes.
note, just because earlier you were like, the expectation as an entrepreneur is that you do like a business book, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I've now started to see this book as a foundational text for entering my world, you know, and that, like, you know, the way I've set up my life, the way I've set up the work that I do and my interests are
Mm.
all around this idea as of like being of cultural ads, of cultural instigation, and of like difference being something that should be embraced, and as a point of connection versus as a point of divide, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that book does a good job of kind of laying out the way in which I see like that lens, that like identity and difference are literally things that you as a human being, you should lean into and utilize for your own personal growth, you know, and utilize for your own personal curiosity, you know, and as a means of connecting with others. It's not something that, you know, we should run away from. It's like we should totally embrace expanding our lens, our vocabulary around how we describe ourselves, our vocabulary around how we engage each other. You know, we should totally embrace that there's enough space for all of us, you know, and that if we create equitable, you know, equal and equitable spaces, that doesn't mean that I lose, but that there's actually a lot of space, you know? And
Yeah.
so that's, you know, I wanted to kind of like clarify that a bit because it
That's
also does.
awesome. And I love that. Like that take. I wish that was mine. You're like, here's my intro. It's not an entrepreneurial guide, it's a children's book. It's so genius. And it ties beautifully in with your logo. Like it's all a theme about you. This
Mhm.
return to identifying as, you know, this strong young child and things like that. I love all of that, the wisdom within children. You've got this environment going that's very copacetic to itself. You know, I really do love that. I'm gonna say it a ton and a ton. I can't wait to
Yeah,
refer people to it. It's gonna be a
yeah,
great tie-in for your book.
yeah. So
um
in
so
terms of
unpacking Genie, yes.
GENIE, yeah. So a word that you've used a lot has been genius, right? So GENIE is like about it started off with the idea of the genius and genie, so like magic of Black women. That was like, you know, the play on that, right? And the idea is that like, you know, how do we, the original hypothesis was like, there are all these like small businesses that exist. Like, you know, think about the Etsy business or think about like the e-commerce business.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they don't really have that many platforms for sharing their products. Like, what would be, how could we do that? Um, I was really interested in like that piece, and then the other piece around um, celebrating the stories of Black women. Before GENIE, I started doing this thing called Michelle Brunch for fun, and we started that like literally, that was, I think, yeah, that was 2009. And it was really when Michelle Obama became like, around her inauguration, when she got into the White House, right? I
Yeah.
was so excited about her and her, this new sort of model that was on the public stage, you know, of what a Black woman could be, like a new, I feel like she was starting a new mythology, really. And so I developed this brunch series where just kind of celebrating her, but also we would have different women, like, you know, little Oprahs, little Michelles, you know, who would curate the brunches and tell their stories, share their leadership techniques. And we did that in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Did it for a number of years, about 5 or 6 years, and it was just for fun. Like literally, was not even. We would never make any money off of it. What you would pay to, whatever you paid to attend the brunch was what would cover our expenses. So we got to
Wow.
about like 2014, so about I think like 5 or 6 years in, and I was like, you know, could this be something? Like, is there, clearly you're interested in this, you know, women's entrepreneurship piece, like ladies who launch, and there's just this other narrative that you see
Yeah.
strand in your life. Could this be a thing? And I looked at the subscription box model and I was like, well, what if we package that brunch? Like we gave you the inspiration, the product recommendations, the storytelling, and we could ship it to you, you know? And so that was the genesis behind GENIE Box.
Oh,
Um, and so it was a subscription box company that we launched in 2016. The idea was that we'd have little Oprahs, little Michelles, and their favorite things. We'd have a different woman curate the box featuring her favorite products. So we'd do two things. One, you know, increase the visibility of these influential women and their stories. And then two, increase the sales capacity of small businesses by diverse founders.
yeah.
And so we did that until like our last box shipped just last year. So just about 3 years. Not uninterrupted though, mind you. Like there was plenty of challenges in that business.
Yeah.
You know, didn't ship monthly like I would have loved to. It was again another self-funded endeavor. I was using the money from Little Big Girl to support GENIE Box.
Yeah.
And we didn't really go out for funding until last year because one of the things that we realized early was that, hey, people would consider this to be a niche audience, so they're not going to necessarily want to back this company based on the fact that we're like dealing with a niche audience. And so we did get a little bit of angel funding last year, um, through Pipeline Angels, who is I can't recommend them enough, for anyone who is thinking about doing, doing an official like raise for their startup. Pipeline Angels is a group of women and non-binary folks who invest in women and non-binary folks, and they invest in scalable companies, but they also invest in like say like a food and beverage or fashion business. Like it doesn't have to always be like a high growth tech company. So people should look into Pipeline Angels. But all that to say is, we got to the end of last year and we thought about, okay, where do we go from here? So this is even before COVID. We're like, been doing this for a little bit. Our margins have been really small. There are so few opportunities here that we see in the business model. One was we noticed, it became an advertising channel for larger companies who were interested in doing multicultural marketing. They want to do
Yeah.
multicultural advertising. We noticed that. We also noticed that we were, providing a discovery vehicle for consumers who wanted to shop their values, who wanted to shop from women and diverse folks, who wanted to be able to like have an easy way of doing that. So we knew that we were kind of serving those two needs in the marketplace. And so just kind of like, could there be a bigger business model, such that our margins would be healthier, and also, there would, we could develop a high growth company. And so we've been on that pivot journey for about 6 months now, and we are, near ready to release our sort of MVP version of the new model. But I can't say exactly what that will look like, but I think you could tell from the two problems that we're trying to solve, which is, creating an opportunity for diverse business owners to reach consumers,
Mm-hmm.
and also create an opportunity for larger brands to connect with multicultural consumers. So, we're building a marketplace around those two ideas, and you'll see more in the coming months.
Yeah, that's a good teaser. That's exciting anyway. I like that. And anyone who's wanting to follow that, like we should definitely. Do you have a favorite social media platform that people who are
Twitter,
reading?
yeah, Twitter or Instagram. I've been a little quiet on both, but like Twitter or Instagram,
What are
I
your
prefer.
handles?
Also at Chana Ewing, on both. So at CHANA EWING.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I can't wait for a good launch, especially right now because nobody's launching when they said they would. So anyone who's going to, I'm like, no problem. I'll wait. I'm wondering, I'm going to pivot now and kind of wrap everything up. I know that everyone's dialogue has changed, and some for better and some for worse, and some just because, but this time for reflection that you had at your first, layoff in 2009, people have kind of globally experienced, or that's what the people I've spoken to, the women, female identified, non-binary individuals over the past 3 months have kind of said, I've taken the time with this forced isolation to really have a dialogue with myself about my company, about my happiness level, things that they just weren't taking the space and holding the platform to do. And so I find this next question to be fascinating because it changed for a lot of people. It changed back. It never stayed the same. And so I'm wondering, can you tell us anything about your goals for the next 1 to 3 years, given your endeavors, and what change has taken place over the past couple of months with those goals?
Yeah. So I think the biggest change that's taken place for me during this pandemic has really been around centering myself. first and foremost in my life in a way that I have not done ever. Like literally, like I am for the first time in my life cooking. Like let's just
Yeah.
start there. Like like I just think it's the like biggest. I'm I'm just so I'm so excited by the fact that I'm finally cooking. Like this
Yeah.
is like so it's just a major step in the right direction around like how I wanna, and I'm not doing it every day. Like, there's some time like maybe once or twice a week, or if I have a really bad week, I might order out. But I I have developed a new habit around cooking, and I want to shout out HelloFresh. They're not giving me any money, but like HelloFresh has been
Yeah.
fantastic because they send you meals, and then they send you all the ingredients, and then you cook the food, right? And they give you recipes. It's a really great way for novice cookers. But I guess the reason why I say that is because my my large goal is now to operate concentrically. Like I want to operate from the inside of me outwardly. And
Yeah.
before, I think my entire career I've been, and I think this happens to most people, most entrepreneurs, most like all of us. I was just so like caught up in like what people think about me. How am I coming off to the general public? How am I coming off to my friends, to clients, to investors? Like so invested in and what that might mean for my business, right? And now I'm like, it doesn't matter. It starts with me, right? And I truly believe that, and I truly have seen that in a way that I haven't seen before. So my biggest goal is to hold on to keeping myself centered and central in my own life, and listening to my own wisdom and my own advice around how to take care of myself. So that's my first and foremost goal. Second to that is continuing to build and grow the communities that I've nurtured before the pandemic, but definitely within this space. So one such example is that like I created a peer group of other entrepreneurs, and we meet every Saturday around developing our business, so such that we continue to survive and also thrive post pandemic. And so I think that creating community, creating team for my businesses are like my kind of my like immediate goals. Like
Yeah.
and then in terms of like growth, I would love to see GENIE scale to like, hundreds of thousands of customers,
Yeah.
serving, tons of like entrepreneurs. So, but really it's about like this operating concentrically. It's more of like a value-based goal.
I love
Um,
that. Yeah.
and see what that materializes to.
That's so great. It's such a visual for me for some reason as well. I picture all of those the maps that you start off with a problem, or meditation maps, and kind of go outward, and at the end you figured yourself out, or even the other way, but you're always trying to reach the center of oneself in that work. It's a great goal. I love it, and it's so so different from those that I've heard recently. And I'm going to wrap everything up today with a question about advice that I post to every person I speak with. And I'm curious if a young woman or female identified or non binary individual, essentially anyone other than a white man, walked up to you tomorrow and said, listen, I've had this history, I had this dream, I wanted to get into writing, I was going to do film work, I came to New York, and I wanted to get all of these things done. I'm keeping my mind open, I'm looking at it from every different angle, I'm doing different things, I think I'm going to start my first company right now. What are the top 3 pieces of advice you would give that individual, knowing what you know now?
Hmm. So the concrete piece of it is get a bookkeeper and accountant early on. Um, uh, and the piece around that is basically um, get people on your team that you don't that are not your skill sets. So even if you can't necessarily hire, you can't like necessarily bring on folks as employees, figure out a way to get folks around you that are not your core skill set. So if that's like, trying to find a friend's mother who's also a bookkeeper, or it's like, trying to find an intern who's an MBA, who's a, CFA, working their way to be a CFA. Like, I don't know, like find a way to surround yourself with people who have disciplines that are not your own. So that would be one, if you're about to start a business. And like in disciplines that are not your own that really impact your business could be like finance, legal,
Yeah.
like any of those sort of domains that may not be your core competencies. So that's one. Two is follow your inspirations. Like really follow them. I love Toby, who is the founder of Shopify Story. He's like, he was into snowboarding and gaming. The gaming taught him how to become a coder, and then the snowboarding was like, oh, I want to build a snowboard shop. So in those two things, he then built his shop, his e-commerce platform that he built for his own shop was so good that it was like, okay, well, maybe we can build this for, millions of shops, and that became Shopify. So
Yeah.
it's like, had he not, like, if he had not followed his interests, he wouldn't be Amazon's competitor today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, so follow your interests, even if they don't seem like they make a lot of sense, or they don't necessarily, or they're not traditional, just follow your interests. And the third thing is build a community. Stay connected to community, at all levels. So, you want advisors, so people who are a few years ahead of you, or have some who've done what it is that you're doing, or think that you might want to do. You want peers,
Yeah.
so you want people who are right in the trenches with you. You want friends who don't have anything to do with what you're doing, maybe, and you want mentees. So you want a real 360-degree community around you as you build out your vision.
Yeah, I love those. It's true. And you kind of cover every aspect that I think is really important when you are starting out. So I've got number one, get a good bookkeeper and accountant, meaning get people on your team that have skill sets other than your own that you're going to need. Number two, follow your inspiration. And number three, build and stay connected to your community, because those are the people that you're going to be functioning in. I love that. And I think it's so true. And the approach is everything, from all angles. And Chana, we are out of time today, but I want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know that everybody's firing on all cylinders right now, and I really appreciate your candor and your time and all of your rhetoric and story today.
This has been a complete pleasure, Patricia. I really appreciate your thoughtful questions and the time you spent with me today.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. And for everyone listening, we've been speaking with Chana Ginelle Ewing. You can find out more about her and all of her endeavors on her website, Chana Ewing. That is ChanaEwing.com. Thank you for giving us your time today. Thank you for listening. And please stay safe, stay well. And until we speak again next time, remember to always bet on yourself. Sluncha.